All right, welcome to another episode of Birdsong. I'm your host Kayuda, and in this episode, I am tuning in with a wise and playful giant. He is a man with a big heart, a big soul, golden hands for bodies sore. Yes, he is an intuitive bodyworker. He's a master of ceremonies, a medicinal storyteller who offers the medicine of mythic wonder to help people slow down so that they can hear the whisper of their soul and connect with the wild one within, which really I would say is a rare gift in this day and age where we're almost being unconditionally or unconsciously conditioned to speed up. So my guest, he's also a wrestler. I reckon he's probably a bit of a jester. It's my man, Bearheart Nathan Meola. Good to have you on here for an episode of Birdsong, brother. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate that wonderful introduction. I'm very, very glad to be here finally with you.
Yeah, it's been a while coming. So to set the scene for those that are tuning in, you mentioned to me that you're up the Central Coast of New South Wales, and it would certainly seem like you've had a fulfilling calendar in terms of your regular story circles, men's gatherings, some improv movement workshops, and then you mentioned your storytelling courses. So in that light, how or what does your schedule actually look like with all of that, yet under this larger umbrella of what we're going to be speaking to, which is actually slowing down?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Sometimes people ask, how are you going? Busy? Like this? And my reply is often, I work very hard at keeping myself not busy. Yeah, you're making sure that I'm not busy. And so what I've discovered is this little wonderful magic that is slowing down, which leads to things speeding up. And it's almost like a dance in the like a mastery of time, or the dance of time, where slowing down more and more in the internal landscape allows every single moment to, like the juice to be extracted fully from every moment, which means that much more actually happens in a day, and or even a moment, or and so there's a lot happening, and the discipline is in staying nice and slow so that I can enjoy it all. And sometimes a day feels like an eternity.
Yeah, I know that feeling. You remind me of that cliche saying, slow is fast. And that can sometimes get thrown out, but I think what you spoke to just there in that short little piece really offered quite a lot of or started to touch upon some of the nuance and the depth in that cliche classic saying.
Well, sometimes, people move with urgency, like there's something, I saw someone the other day, they was sitting in the car and they had to jump out of the car to go and tell someone something, and they did it, with a big internal kind of combustion, and open the door and pull the handbrake and jump out and do, and then they came back in, and there was comments made about like, oh, I thought someone had fallen, or there was some accident. And it's like, no, I just had to tell that person something before they left. And I smiled to myself because I realized that it actually, going slow is not actually slower than going fast. And going faster is not actually faster than going slow. That the time it takes itself is really like there's not that much difference. You can slow down on the internal and bring awareness to every step, every breath, every moment. That let go of the feeling of urgency in life.
Yeah, what I might be hearing you speak to, the theme that I might be hearing you speak to, is a quality of presence.
I would say that this is about the simplest that it gets. You know, there's a core message or a medicine that I carry, and it's very simple because it all boils down to awareness and presence. And so, if I move slowly, it's only because moving fast means that I'm not present with every moment or every step. It's the same way, it's the same discipline that I apply to the words that I speak. The reason that I move slowly and speak slowly is so that I can own every word before it comes out of my mouth. You know, it's the same with the breath. It's like not skipping steps, and by doing so, then you get to bring ceremony to every moment. A ceremony for me is presence, and in doing that, the richness of life, every moment expands into infinity, and that's such a juicy way to live that I seem to have discovered, and it feels like an act of revolution, active resistance to the way that the world is moving and has been moving. And it feels like this is the wave that is beginning to form. So I feel blessed and honored to be alive right now and with my eyes open, and to be carrying this medicine of slowing down. And there is a reason why I have this medicine, and yeah, we can talk about that as well.
Yeah, I've got a lot of sparks, potential threads of conversation going off in my head right now. And what I will mention, I'm tracking this one in real time. It's certainly been an active observation of mine, and something that I value within yourself is the way it's your quality of presence and the way that you show up in social media through the digital world with what feels like a very centered and grounded nervous system, which allows you to present as calm and, or really it's this gift and this medicine that you're speaking to, that showing up the way that you do, it has this synchronous quality through the screen of allowing, what's the word I'm looking for? There's a resonance of slowing down. I feel it within myself, and it's certainly more medicine that I could do within my life, because I know that I have consciously been conditioning myself to speed up, particularly through the digital world, the social media world, and becoming aware of how the game is often played through the collective of what we might call the content producers or the content creators, or trying to develop and build an audience in the online world. It's the fast-paced, give it to me now, rapid fire, digital dopamine fix, social media culture. So I quite naturally am like yourself, where I like to pause, and I can't remember the words that you use, something to the degree of own the words or the language that's coming out of your mouth.
Hmm.
I have, yeah, there's a particular quality of awareness that I like to offer, and the pause to track the thoughts and consciousness and to speak with awareness. That doesn't, the social media world, or at least we're being conditioned to think this way, that it's not quite gratuitous to those who kind of show up in this way.
Yeah. I, I I like to allow people to see the wrestling that's happening on the inside as like right now, I'm on a podcast with you and we're talking and there are people listening. So there is an aspect that's saying, okay, make sure that you're saying valuable things, make sure that you're getting the information out, make sure that it's entertaining, etc., etc.
Sure.
And then that other part, the wild part of me, really, the inner elder, the the master on the inside,
Mm-hmm.
who has been here and watched me come and go, 10,000 times at least in different forms. That one has seen it all before, and that one sits quietly and watches with a slight smile on its face. You know, a chuckle every now and then,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and so that the wrestling that happens on the inside. We can talk more about my views on wrestling and
Mm.
and and how external wrestling is really simply a reflection of the internal wrestle that that's always going on, never ending. That has no beginning or end. Is just an acceptance of continually showing up, and in this instance, that wrestle is uh, letting people see the that um, sometimes the word is not there in the moment that I need it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I let people see that. There's a moment of like, I don't know if the next word is going to be there for me, but then it's a sinking into trust and letting the words. You said tracking. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And
Mm.
when you're tracking, it's about softening. It's about widening the gaze.
Mm.
It's about bringing stillness to the breath and letting the movements, um, the subtle movements, uh, um, it's like I don't know where the words are coming from, but they're bubbling up from some source,
Mm.
and I'm simply um, taking it from that bubbling and sharing it. But it's often uncomfortable, particularly when engaging in a conversation where
Mm.
the traditional conditioned way of being is ask a question, answer a question, ask a question, and in this kind of conditioned habitual thing,
Mm.
as opposed to look at my eyes and see that I'm searching, that I'm tracking, that I'm
Mm-hmm.
that I'm in some deep part of myself where these words are, where I'm not in control of the words, but the words are coming from somewhere else. And in that instance, like what I've said in the last 30 seconds to a minute uh, is not really anything at all, you know. However, um, it's conveying or expressing the inexpressible
Mm-hmm.
from the inside,
Mm.
which I know I will never be able to express fully and accurately, but at least we can be here together, uh, in presence with that wrestling, with that engagement. Yeah.
Yeah. I love the tracking of those thoughts, and yeah, to reiterate, it's potent medicine for these times, particularly when we're inundated with so many videos that are highly polished from social media influencers and speakers, talkers who seem to have that gift of the gab where it's just on point all the time, conditioning a lot of people to think that that's the way that it should be, or it has to be done, or why can't I be as articulate or fluid with my speech as that? So I really appreciate this way of showing up. It's, for me, it's real, it's great, it's needed.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm always very suspicious of people who speak as if they know. Like suspicious and a little mesmerized. I'm just like, even somebody who's able to very quickly answer a question like, "How are you?" I always wonder, wow, goodness me, how do you know? I always have to go in and do some tracking, first.
Totally.
Yeah.
My default response to "How are you?" is typically, well, I'm multidimensional.
Yeah.
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 That's the default answer, but then what precedes that? Well, yeah.
And with social media, I just like to show up in the way that feels best for me. And I think if there are 6 people that watch this reel from start to finish, that's amazing. 6 people who sit and like take their time to watch a video, and not just scroll past, to watch a whole 30 seconds or a whole 90 seconds of me talking. Like, that's beyond my wildest dreams anyway. And I have so much gratitude for that. And all that. And then that just means I don't really have to worry about all the algorithms, things. Like, my life's running pretty well, and yeah, all of that.
Well, we're 20 minutes into chatting. For this podcast, we did have the idea, or at least you offered the idea, to weave a story throughout. And I'm not entirely sure how this is going to look, but we will go with the flow. And it's a story that I'm familiar with, but this is one of the great things I think about stories and myth. The idea, and I love this idea, and perhaps it's more than just an idea, really, that stories and myth are living creatures, living beings. They're malleable, ever evolving, and perhaps depending on the storyteller, they're going to be infused with their own unique flavors, textures, contours. And we'll get to the story in a second, but how do you feel about that idea? How do you usually language it?
Yes. It feels like, for me, a story has a skeleton. And as a storyteller, I'm present with the people I'm telling the story with. It's not a performance or an act. And what goes on the skeleton, the meat and the flesh of the story, is what I bring as Nathan Meola here at this time, and what comes through. And stories are nourishing in another way. The food is nourishing, and water is nourishing, and connection and communication, and all these things are nourishing, and stories themselves are nourishing. So treat stories with reverence and respect for the path that they've walked to get to us, through all the jaws of the storytellers, throughout our ancestry, So, yeah, yeah. Maybe you could say some words now.
I love that. All right. Well, the story that you have offered to share with us
Yeah.
is the Lindworm Prince. Now, you can perhaps offer me perhaps some insight into how you might like to go about sharing that. But before we start, something that I did want to ask, or rather offer another question or two, is around starting to layer some more kind of understanding around mythic storytelling. Maybe to say this in a different way, or to just ask the question explicitly. Do you feel that there is any, or what kind of context do you find is useful, if any, to provide when it comes to myth and storytelling, mythic storytelling, and perhaps whether it's to do with significance in our own psyche or human culture, and or from history up to present day times? Is there anything pertinent to speak to?
Yeah, there was a certain there was a particular time in history where we existed mythically. We had what we had was a mythic way of being, and stories were woven into the fabric of of every day. The way the wind blows, and the birds that fly past, and the fire, and the animate nature of all things, a, a mythic lens that we saw the world through, that at some point was replaced by the scientific process to categorize and label and dissect, in this attempt to understand, that seems at some point to, as that understanding developed, to replace myth and replace this mythic way of being, or at least put it into the realm of just stories. We don't need those stories anymore because now we know. And so I think what it feels like in that process, as we come into this where we are now, that we've lost the ability, lost perhaps out of practice, in the art of seeing the world mythically, and existing in that mythic space, in favor of this rational, logical, logos, facts, figures, elevation of science. And so children quite naturally are able to listen to stories and have a mythic imagination. And so my work is using stories to awaken the mythic imagination, and the the way that I feel, that like the all healing is imagination. You know, to imagine what's happening in the internal landscape of the body, is the process of healing. Memories are imagination, and shifting stories that are on the inside is a process of imagination as well. So I see storytelling and listening to stories as imagination training, and that's how I approach it. So to listen to a story over and over, and to begin that process of relearning the language of myth, is really the, the the process of letting go, actually letting go of the need to understand, and listening to a story and letting it wash over you. It's like listening with the soul ears, and letting it be in the bones, without trying to figure out where it's going. And these stories, these old stories, are like encoded with symbolism, messages, um, you know, and they're like, it's like a window into the past, a window into our ancestors and storytellers of old. So, um, yeah,
Mm.
yeah, this is how, and this story in particular, Lindworm, is a very significant story to me. It was actually the first story I ever told around a fire,
Mm.
and the first story that really hit me and has just been with me since that time. It helped me in so many ways.
Mm.
Yeah.
I suspect you have some insights, and it's been an interesting thing to really track that relationship as it's evolved from the first time you told it around a fire to us sitting here right now, too.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, I do live in the land of the leaf blowers, and all of these houses around here. I sometimes wonder when the leaf blowers start that where the leaves are being blown to,
Mm.
and sometimes I just imagine the one person is blowing leaves into the next person's yard, and then they blow the leaves into another person's yard, and it just goes round and round. So I'm not sure if you can hear all of that, but
I can hear a little bit of it, but that's okay. The land of the leaf blowers. It's a magical world if we have the eyes and the ears to hear it.
yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Mm.
swirling, dancing, moving. And the story itself evolves as I tell it, as I evolve,
Hmm.
and so every time I tell it, there's a different part that catches me, a different part that means something. And this is the magic of storytelling, that it's infused, the stories are infused with the storyteller and the storyteller's life. So yeah, I have tracked that relationship internally, as well as,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask if you had any prompts or context that you usually provide, but it sounds like you offered that in what you were just speaking to. So, if there were, unless there was anything else, my next question is, how do you wish to offer us this story?
Yeah, well, I can just go for a bit, and then we can just take a pause at some natural break
Mm.
in the story, and we can talk about that, and then continue on from there. There's so much juice in it. So I would invite any of the listeners uh, to take this in any way that they wish.
Mm.
Close your eyes or take some breaths and come on this journey, because we're leaving this time, we're leaving this place, and moving into another place, and uh, underground really is where these stories live. So you can find yourself on the land, on the earth, held by the four directions, held by the earth, and underneath the sky and grandfather sun, into this the realm of myth and story that lives down underneath the roots of the world tree in the dark earth. And this is the soul work, the soul ears. And so with the breath and with the deepening, we can go back, once upon a time, once underneath a time, once around a time, back in a time when time wasn't ticking like a clock but flowing like a river, back to this place where all of the stories and all of the characters of all of the stories all exist inside you, in the center of your chest, in the kingdom surrounded by that great forest. And you can feel now that in that kingdom, in the center of that kingdom, is that castle. And in that castle, there is a king and a queen. King and a queen, good people with with a sadness, with a sadness, with a grief. And the grief is they cannot have children. They desperately want children, cannot have children. And in that grief, the queen often goes walking right there by the edge of the forest, on the edge between the domestic and the wild, her favorite time of the day, and this as the sun is just falling over the horizon and splashing the sky with those vivid colors, purples and orange and yellows, and that dusk, and when the crickets start, and this kind of time, um, um, an old woman comes out from an oak tree and asks her what's the matter, and the queen, for some reason, tells her everything, and the old woman says, "Well, I can help you." And she says very simply, tells the queen to speak her desires out to the trees, into the leaves, into the grass, into the gardens, and to whisper that desire into this cup, and to flip it onto the dark earth, and to go home to make love to her husband, and in the morning to return to the garden in the northwest corner, and to open up that cup from the earth, and to see there a red flower and a white flower, red flower and white flower. And the old woman says to the queen, "Eat the white flower, eat the white flower, and all of your dreams will come true. But whatever you do, whatever you do not eat the red flower." Do you understand? And the queen says yes, and the old woman disappears. And it happened exactly like that. And as the queen was there looking at this red and white flower that next morning, with the sensation overcoming her body, with every intention in the world of eating the white flower, for some reason, we don't know why, she reached for the red flower, and before she or the king could do anything about it, she had gobbled up the red flower. And after that, not knowing what to do, not knowing the consequences of such a thing, she simply ate the white flower as well. And her and the king, they made a decision not to tell anyone about it. She got pregnant. 9 months later, she's in the room with all of the women, and they brought the doula in there and sung all of the thousands of songs that are sung at a time like this. And at the moment of birth, with the doula right there in between the queen's legs, what came out of the queen, what was born, was not a child, but a small black worm, like a serpent. And the doula very quickly tossed it out the window before anyone noticed. And soon after, a baby was born. Beautiful, beautiful blonde hair, blue eye boy, and the kingdom rejoiced. The kingdom rejoiced. And from that moment on, the crops began to grow again, and everything was well for 16 years. 16 years as that golden boy, the prince, grew into a beautiful young man. While out there in the forest, this great dark serpent lived and grew and survived and scavenged and grew scaly and grew angry, looking in from the outside, being totally ignored and totally unacknowledged, while the golden child lived in this beautiful, beautiful life, celebrated by all. So, right there is the whole setup. and here it is, you know, living the golden life that we live in this world with our eyes open, while out there in the forest there's a dark force peering in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The red flower. What is it within us that compels us to have the red flower?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. It's like with these fairy tales, it's like anytime there's a rule established, we know it's only so that it will be broken.
Mm.
And there's if we're listening to these stories with the modern mind, we might start to ask questions like, well, why? Why did she eat the red flower?
Mm.
She was told not to eat the red flower.
Mm.
Why is there even a red flower? Why does it exist? Why isn't it just more simple than that?
Mm-hmm.
What, does the old woman know when she's setting this up?
Mm.
Um, and as we continue the story, we see that actually, without that, what we would call a sacred transgression, that there is no story. It's these moments in these stories that move things forward. But there's no such thing as a mistake.
Mm.
That the thing that we call a mistake is actually the only thing that makes the story.
Mm. Is that what you mean by sacred transgression?
Yeah, we use that to say that, like, the necessary mistake, like there's
Mm.
like necessary rule breaking that happens, like with the queen, you know, beyond her control, really, like an unconscious instinctual, um, you know,
Mm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And there's something about this story and it can why it has reached our point in time right now. The cockatoos agree. But there's something within this that is clearly universal for it to stand the test of time. And I suspect it's not just one thing, there's many themes within this. And I'm curious, when you share these stories, whether it's online or beside the fire, do you usually offer certain pauses within the story?
yeah. Sometimes with moments of breath work in the middle, or
Hmm.
yeah, O- often to digest it and to be
Mm.
with it. Yeah.
Mm.
Um,
Mm. So breath work is one, or any kind of somatic process to help the story continue to percolate
yeah.
within can be a useful thing.
Yeah. Bring musicians in to play music and
Mm.
to soften and deepen and to take our time with it. You know,
Mm.
um, 16 years went by uh, as that child grows,
Mm.
and
Mm.
16 years worth of time. You can just imagine that by the time the prince grows to 16, he's ready to go out and find his wife, and the parents give him a horse and say, off you go, and he goes riding out into the forest, and he comes
Mm.
to a crossroads, and right there this great big serpent appears and peers down at him and says, older brothers marry first. He's a great big serpent saying, older brothers marry first. And the boy is startled. The horse rears up, and he tries to find another way around. But at every crossroads, he's confronted with this great dark force saying, older brothers marry first. And so the boy rides home to his parents and asks them if, hey, what's going on? There's this big creature out there that's saying it's my older brother. And, did something happen during the birth? And what was it? And the parents know nothing about it. And so they go and ask the doula, and eventually the doula tells them, yes, the queen gave birth to a worm, and I didn't think much of it, so I tossed it out the window. But never mind, because we've got this beautiful prince here, and everything's fine, right? Well, not so. This is one of my favorite parts of the story, is that the king's response now, once he learns that, there's another son, another child out there, but it's a great dark force, and it needs to be dealt with, and it's a great serpent. What to do about it? Well, here's the beauty of this story, is that he doesn't send the army, he doesn't send the mercenaries or the hunters to kill the serpent. He says, make a place for it. Make a place for it in the castle, and send the poets, and send the storytellers, and send the artists, and send the dancers, and send the bards, and court the wild twin back. So I first heard this story from Martin Shaw, and he has a beautiful book, Courting the Wild Twin, and this idea of that there's a wild twin that was born at the same time as you, tossed out the window, has been growing and lonely in its bones for you this whole time, while you've been living your life, and with the job and family, and like getting through making all these decisions in this, but out there's a wild, old, ancient force that knows everything that you don't know. That's peering in. This is that idea of Grendel in Beowulf. There's a force there, and it's scary, and it's out there, and it's unacknowledged, so you don't even know that it's there, right? But everything visible in the current life it seems like this is all there is, but no, there's a whole vast invisible world out there, and now it's been acknowledged in this story, and now it comes time to welcome it back in. And how do you go about welcoming the dark wild force, the other half of you, back in when you didn't even know it was there? How would you coax a stray cat into your home? Gently, softly, not with force. This is what this tells us, is to deepen, to soften, to bring sensitivity, to listen, to slow down, to sit in nature, to learn the language of the birds, to speak to the trees, to pray, to connect with the oneness that we are with nature, to welcome the wild one back in. And that's what happens. That wild one, that serpent, comes back slowly, gently into the very heart of the castle, and then they go about the process of finding a wife for this prince. And so I don't know, I like to say, they create a Tinder profile for it. They put it out there. They put advertisements to say, hey, who wants to come and marry this tall, dark prince? And so they get plenty of applications from probably pretty young women who
a lot of swiping rights, or is it swiping left these days? I can't.
I'm not sure.
There's a lot of swiping.
I'm not sure of the directions of the swipes, but they did have applicants, and so probably young, pretty women looking for their opportunity to become, to marry a prince, and so they bring the woman in and put her in the dress real quick, and take her into the chapel, and you got the priest there, and he's shaking, he's nervous, and she's standing there on her own. And they open up the door, and You see that moment when they open up the cage for a captive animal, everyone stands aside. This great serpent slithers into the chapel, sidles up next to this woman, and she's just like, whoa. And they say he wraps his tail around her 3 times and squeezes. And the priest, you've never heard anyone conduct a ceremony so quickly, and then they send her into the bedroom chamber, because of course it's not finalized until the next morning when they come in. And so the next morning, the king, the queen, the priest, they go to the door and they open it up gently, and out from that room, the great serpent bellows, older brothers marry first, a bride for me before a bride for thee. And they look there, and there's nothing but a pile of bones. Mm-hmm. So this great dark force has just consumed this young, perhaps naive woman. And that little scene plays out over and over and over and over and over again. Over and over. And pretty soon the applicants start drying up. Everyone starts to hear word that there's this big dark serpent in there, and anyone who goes in doesn't come out again. And at this point, everyone's left the castle, and this dark force is being felt throughout the land. The crops are barren. It's a real dark time. Even the rats are leaving the castle.
Yeah.
What to do? And then, finally, after almost all hope is given up, a young girl from the edge of the kingdom, the daughter of a farmer, accepts and says, I will do that. She doesn't even know why, and she's a little bit scared. She doesn't know what compels her to say that, but she goes out into the forest and speaks to the trees and asks for some assistance. And an old woman comes out of the oak tree and tells her to ask for 1 year and 1 day of time to prepare, and tells her to sew together these wedding shirts, wedding dresses, elaborately embroidered wedding garments that take a long time to make, even for somebody who's experienced. And this girl has no experience at all, and she's told to make 7 of these. And at the time of the ceremony of the wedding, to ask for 2 buckets of lye, ashes and water mixed together, that corrosive substance, and a tub of warm milk and 2 wire scrubbing brushes, and then that old lady disappears. So over the next year and a day, this girl sets about working on these wedding shirts, pricking her finger over and over as she weaves in and out and embroiders and makes these intricate patterns of these 7 shirts. And when she's done, she sends word, and they bring her in just like they brought in all the other women. And as she stands there in front of the priest, the serpent comes out, and in that same way, standing over her, wrapping its tail around her 3 times, and she looks up and she says, wow, there he is, my husband. She says, oh, he's so handsome. Oh, I can't wait. She almost tells the priest, hurry up. I want to get back into this bedroom. And the serpent is kind of like set back a little bit. It's like, this woman's a little sassy. She's got something about her, some sharpness in her eyes, some wisdom, something that she's been through something. And when they get in the room, the serpent looks down at her and says, take off your clothes. And this is that moment, right? And she looks back at him, directly at him, and says, yes, I will. I want to, my dear husband. I will take off my wedding shirt if you will take off one set of your scales, strip one of your skins. And the serpent says to her, no one has ever asked me to do that before. And then he goes about stripping one layer of his skin. And the screams could be heard throughout the kingdom. This is a painful process to strip a skin. And when he's done, he looks at her again and says, take off your clothes. And she says, I want to. I will take off one of my wedding shirts if you take off another set of your skin. Now she's wearing all 7 of these wedding shirts. So this process happens 7 times, 7 sets of skin, each one more agonizing than the last, until finally at the end of it, what's left is a kind of blubbering, white, kind of translucent larvae worm thing. Yeah. And she takes the wire scrubbing brushes, dips it in the lye, and she just begins to scrub at this soft, delicate skin of this worm. And if you thought the screams were bad before, you should have heard it now. It was the most horrific sound. Everybody could hear it. And she didn't stop. For hours she scrubbed at the skin. And once one of those metal brushes was worn down to nothing, she grabbed the next one and kept going. And after all of that, well into the night, what was left there was a man. A man. A man with the look on his face of someone who's been tossed out into the forest, exiled for 16 years. And she took that man and dipped him into the milk and bathed him. And then after that, they climbed into bed together, and we don't know exactly what happened behind those doors, but it said that those who were outside the doors listening couldn't tell whether they were laughing, crying, dancing, or making love. And in the morning, when the king and the queen and the priest opened up that door, not knowing what to expect, they saw those two lying there with faces of radiant contentment. And there was a great wedding, of course. They found a bride for the younger brother as well. It was a double wedding. And this is the wedding, the wedding that went for 3 days and 3 nights, the wedding where all of the people that you love and that are dear to you, they're all there. You're there, I'm there. And this wedding continues to this day, the wedding in the center of your chest in that kingdom. Yeah, the wedding between the wild serpent and the woman with the educated heart. The marriage between the domestic and the wild. This union of polarities. Yeah.
Marvelous rendition and quite a story. I'm actually quite confused where to take this now, because as the host of a podcast and being in this dynamic where we're on a podcast,
Yeah.
there's the obligation to speak straight afterwards, when really after receiving the story, what feels natural in my body is to sit in silence and to allow the many threads to work through me, to percolate in the imagery and the symbology. Because while Martin Shaw's book on this story is named Courting the Wild Twin, and there's quite evidently a major theme there of the wild twin that we've been separated with from birth, there are so many other themes as you're telling the story that come up in the body and in the psyche.
Yeah.
And I can sense, once again, it's a remembering of this importance of slowing down, to digest, to chew on,
Yeah.
or rather to be chewed on.
Yeah.
Both, I suspect.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we are all the characters in the story, all together at one, and as the story nourishes us, so too do we nourish it. And the way that 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 we do that is by feeding the story, and feeding the story is feeding the story with the images. And so, for anyone listening, or you yourself, there are some images from the story that are potent, or that are awaken inside you, and it's nice to acknowledge those images and perhaps write them down, or be with them and see how they affect you. For right now, I'm existing and living in this suburban coastal place, working on the everyday outer world things of making money, running a business, developing relationships, paying rent, feeding myself, all of these, outer world things, while inside me there's a longing for the forest, and a longing for that connection. And this is that dance between the domestic life, the ordinary life, and the non-ordinary, and so that's really potent for me right now, in where I am.
What might you have to share in regards to this convergence of the idea of the wild twin and slowing down? Where do those two rivers meet, and what can that offer us?
The boy goes off riding on the horse to go and find a wife. It's all quite, this is where I'm going, and he's confronted by this serpent that actually slows everything down, slows the whole story down. So the boy has to return, can't continue with his life the way that it was all planned out to be, go and get a wife and get married and then become king. It's like, no, something has come that needs to be dealt with, and in doing so, all of the plans are tossed out the window, and something else needs to be confronted. So, uh, you know, like, to be so caught up in the ordinary horizontal life tasks, and job and mortgage, and all of the things, as if there's some plan that we can follow. Meanwhile, out there's an unknown dark force, or out there, or in there, down in there, an unknown dark force that has other plans, that needs to be satisfied, that needs to be acknowledged before this continual, never-ending movement. And so, to contact that part means to let go of the idea that I'm in control, and I know what's coming, and I've got this 3 to 5 year plan and goals and all of this stuff. And it just, everything needs to stop to face that which needs to be faced. Yeah.
I'm wondering about this need to control, and how this might tie into the way that we approach a myth or a story. Because I'm kind of tracking different ways that we could approach the story, and how the story can approach us. In one sense, there's the modus operandi, which a lot of us operate from, which is the analytical, it's the rational, the logical, to try and extract some kind of immediate meaning or kind of linear understanding of the story, and extrapolate upon that and what it means to us, to have a handle on that. And then, of course, from the other, there's, which I think you mentioned before, we can allow ourselves to steep in the imagery, the symbology, the the metaphor to really allow that to work through us and to allow ourselves to simmer in that and for it to percolate in our bodies. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah. It's inviting the story itself to do its work on you in a way that you don't or I don't understand. To not try too hard to understand it, or to not try too hard to relate the characters to different characters in our life. Like, or the serpent is like, I've got an older brother, and so the serpent is my older brother, in that way. It's like, no. What if you saw through the eyes of the serpent? What if you saw through the eyes of all these different characters? Yeah.
And then what else might you have to share or suggest or encourage to all of us, really, when it comes to the question of how do we or how can we continue to work with myth in general, but also this myth specifically in our daily lives? And not just myth, but story too. I remember you mentioning something to me about one of the ways in which you are working with your storytelling group, which is to tell the story or to get used to telling the story of the kind of the mundane, our ordinary lives, something around this. I suspect there's a link here as well.
Yeah, I was going to move into that direction, to simply say that like there is incredible medicine in stories, in all the stories that we have, in the everyday stories, and the things that happen, in 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 surrounding yourself with people who are capable of hearing your stories and who are updated on your life, unconditional listening, um, and uh, and in doing so, really allowing the stories that are asking to be told on the inside to be told. Stories that have shame, stories that have darkness, stories that themselves are that dark force that overpower us, memories, these stories that have never been spoken out loud. And what happens on the inside when those stories begin to grow lonely and frustrated at not being acknowledged, and perhaps sharing a story like that with somebody who's not capable of hearing it, and the story, you know, getting even more frustrated and building and festering. It's like that feminine wearing the 7 wedding shirts stands there and says, shed your skin. And she's done the work to have those 7 shirts so that she can receive the skin, each and every one of them, all the way down, right? Rather than this habitual way of interacting where I share something and then you respond to it or give me some advice or tell me, it's like practicing telling the stories, but then also learning how to catch a story of someone else, acknowledging the medicine and being present with a person so the story itself can be caught. And when a story is caught, it's like a breath of relief. Oh, oh, okay. And then it transmutes. It's free. It grows wings. It flies away. So yeah, I'm working with the storytelling group, not on the hero's journey, not on even any of these old myths, but actually freeing the mouth, freeing the body to share openly stories. And then on the other side, how do you be present with somebody? How we call that work, the year and one day of sewing those wedding shirts is like the heart work, the work to cultivate the heart, to educate the heart. And when you educate your heart, you can stand in front of somebody with the 7 shirts on. And it's that feminine coming up towards that dark masculine force and saying, I can handle what you've got. Show me, tell me. And I can see that beneath all those layers and all those scales, there's this beautiful, pure, innocent heart. And what a blessing to walk through life with that invitation. That's how I walk through life. Opening, allowing, listening, receiving, softening. It's like softening to hear the sound of the wind as it plays the leaves of a tree. Softening to hear the stories of the cockatoos and the stories of the leaf blowers. They say every sound is a sign of life. Whether you consider it to be natural or not natural, it's all natural. It's a sound of people living. And to stand face to face with someone with the invitation in my heart to say, tell me your stories, I'm here to listen. And it's such a joyful way of living and being, and acknowledging the medicine that you carry in your being. The medicine that you carry as the way that one lives life as art, art as medicine, and art, your life is your art, and your art is your gift, and your gift is your life, and you offer that freely as you walk through the earth, acknowledging your own shining gift, free from the cloak of darkness. It's like giving up all ideas of personal internal privacy and shattering wide open, and allowing the heart to be shattered and free. And so when someone is in the presence with me, they see it all. They even see the difficulty I might have in finding the words to say. You can see now as, we're some way into this podcast, and now I'm starting to feel, and now I'm starting to free the words, and it takes time. There is some way that this relates to the work that I do with bodies as well. There's something about what happens when the trauma that's been experienced, or the pain, or some injury, or something in the body, it grows armor around it, like a cloak of armor, which prevents the light of awareness from shining into the dark parts of the body. And so a shadow grows into these areas, armoring grows, and then it's protection against that part being touched. And this is like the stories that go cranky in the body, that dark force, the dark serpent in the body, the wild, dark body, and facing that and reconnecting the domestic with the darkness of the wild body, and the stories that are contained in the body. So letting the stories of the body be heard and spoken through touch.
That was a beautiful riff. Yeah, I would love to offer an invite to talk about your healing hands more. But just to backtrack, I love what you were speaking about around art. I've long loved this idea that, yes, we can create art, but we are the art. It's like we often think about working on projects, but the greatest project, the most beautiful project that we will ever have the opportunity to work on, it is ourselves. And then I was tracking these threads as you were speaking with it's a different skill set or a different set of qualities. The art of telling versus the art of listening. And I suspect
Yeah.
that perhaps we have our own proclivities of what we might naturally kind of gravitate to as a kind of baseline skill. Some of us are perhaps we talk more. Perhaps some of us feel like we're more receptive to stories. So I just feel like there's different qualities there. But
Well, if I call myself a storyteller, and I can say that now to somebody, and it's true, and I can and I can know it. I know what that means for me, and it's part of my way of showing up in my art that I can do that. However, I know that more than a storyteller, I'm a story catcher. And the developing of the ability to tell stories is only so that I can go first to give permission to people so that they can then return with a story. And then I know that that's the magic. The magic is in hearing the story, catching the story, and being that one where people feel safe to share their story. So they go hand in hand.
yeah,
They go
sure.
hand in
Yeah,
hand.
totally. I get the sense of that. And then there may be an identity that people may unconsciously continue to ingrain into their sense of self around storytelling, which is, I'm not a storyteller. I'm not a storyteller. And from one perspective, sure, if you're a professional storyteller, if you wanted to use that kind of language in that context, but then from another point of view, someone might suggest that, of course, we are all storytellers. And this links into perhaps someone not being able to open their mouth and express through having those somatic energetic densities or blockages, which in turn, which is how you help with your healing hands and the body work.
Yeah. Well, you don't really have to go back very far into your ancestry to find a storyteller. To say everyone's a storyteller is true, but it's also a little kind of cliche. But we're all telling stories all the time. Our bodies are telling stories. All healing is working with stories. It's like whether it's NLP or hypnosis or coaching or or any methodology or modality. To heal a memory or trauma from the past is to is to repackage it, re-see it, retell it. Tell shame does not survive in the light. To shed light and shed light on the body. So not only are we all storytellers, but we are all everything. At some point in our history, in our ancestry, there's a storyteller, there's a healer, there's an oracle, there's a firekeeper or a merchant, on and on and on and on, all the way back. And so these stories, we're all the characters in all the stories. In that story that we just heard, she spends a year and a day weaving, and this symbolism of weaving is passing the needle and thread from the front side of the embroidery, where it's all beautiful, and to the back side where it's a bit chaotic and messy and furry. It doesn't quite look the same on the reverse side. That's like the other side of it's like when you go to a very fancy hotel and you open up a door that maybe you shouldn't open up, and you find yourself in the back corridor where the staff put their shoes and hang their thing, and like it's just a different world back there. It's just all grey concrete with exposed pipes and stuff. The inner workings. And so as she's weaving, passing that needle and thread from this world to the other world and back
Mm-hmm.
and back and back. And she does that for a year. This is the weaving that where the storyteller who exists in that hinge between this world and the other, the boundary crosser, the ferryman who can, Hermes, the Greek god of the storyteller god, who was the psychopomp who could move between all the levels from down to the deepest, darkest parts to bring souls down there, to retrieve souls, to go up to Olympus and everywhere in between.
Mm.
This is our innate ability to weave between these worlds. And that process, that weaving, is also the process of art. So whatever art that you're engaging in, Robert Bly tells a beautiful little story that he and his wife were traveling in some country, and there was a woman there weaving every day, weaving, and Robert Bly, beautiful American poet and author, and just one of my great mentors from a distance who's passed from this life now, Robert Bly. And his wife asked the woman, "What are you doing?" And the woman, as she was weaving, replied, "I'm keeping my marriage together. I'm keeping my marriage together." And this goes into the importance of creating, the importance of art, the importance of craft, the importance of using hands, to carve, to weave, to make fire, to cook, to love, to caress, not just to sit and type away at a keyboard, so art as medicine, storytelling, and all the different forms of art, music and dance and healing,
Well, on that note of the art of healing, my ears pricked up when you shared about the lineage of your hands-on healers from, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the mountains off the coast of Italy.
Yeah.
I love the sound of this thread, and there are so many directions we could go here, but is this something that you've always known about, or is this a recent discovery in your lineage?
Well, yes, let me tell you.
Yeah, I would love to hear.
When I was a child and would visit my grandparents, my grandfather and grandmother on my father's side come from the mountains in Italy, in a region called Puglia, in a small village up there, which I visited before. It's carved into the mountains, and they're mountain people, rock people. You can see it even in me, a big head and big jaw and big thick bodies, and those two, my grandfather and grandmother, were both born in that village, and so were their parents, on and on. Like, I did a little DNA ancestry, and it's a circle about that big in the middle of Italy, and that's it. My grandfather was a healer in the village. People would come to him when they had issues of all sorts, and his sister as well, and they got that passed down from their father, my great-grandfather, who was the seventh son of 7 sons. And when I would visit my grandfather, he would massage my chest with his fingers, like iron fingers that would scrape down the front of my chest in these particular patterns. If I had a cold, it would be a different way. He'd have his eyes closed and be saying some Italian words. And he could only do certain things at certain times in accordance with the moon and days of the week. And he would take olive oil and say some words and spit into it 3 times. And there was all this stuff going on. And I remember being a child lying on the kitchen table while he's making ear candles and ear candling and doing this stuff. And So that was all part of me growing up, but the way it was generally seen was that he was just a bit of a crazy old man,
Hmm.
and like everyone would just like allow him to do these things to be, but no one really believed it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I, as a child, saw that he really was doing something.
Mm.
Years and years later, my grandfather um, died, and he was just a funny man. He was just like a joker, very charismatic. I didn't really like to work very much. Played the harmonica, sung, always a smile, was telling lots of stories, and would just tell stories about like all the fights that he would have, and like to drink wine, and he was this kind of character,
Uh-huh.
And after he passed, I learned that there was actually that there was actually a book that had these words and blessings and prayers,
Mm.
and that it existed, that his sister had it, and that was years and years ago, and I just kept that knowledge with me. And then when he passed, and as I was going through my journey, living out in the forest, um, a couple of years ago, I was questing for my name, my true name. This is where Bear Heart emerged from the forest, and and then my livelihood. So, if I'm Bear Heart, then what livelihood does does Bear Heart do? And it all came together and coalesced into this. Oh, actually, getting my hands onto people, and this image of a great big bear like tearing people apart. And so this was the movement for me into bodywork, and beginning that work, which my body was so awakened to, as I felt my grandfather's hands coming through me. And it just made so much sense. It meant that I didn't have to, because I've been running a coaching business for years, and I was just a little bit sick of that whole thing, the whole
Mm-hmm.
industry, and the whole like diving in and questioning and asking. It just, I was on a quest for something more subtle than that,
Mm.
and so that's where bodywork came alive, and I started working with people and working with their
Mm.
bodies, and working with the stories that were woven into the fabric of the
Mm.
body. And just recently, it was like 3 weeks ago, I went to Sydney for the first time in a couple of months. And for somehow and some reason, it was the time for me to visit my great aunt, my grandfather's sister.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat with her and I asked her about the healing. And she went into the back room and she got that little book.
Mm.
And it had all the blessings, all the different words to say, to bless the oil, to work on different pains, sciatic pain and sore throats and sore bellies and
Mm.
trouble breathing, and how to stop bleeding, and how to remove curses, and some strange old stuff from another time. And she gave them to me, so I have those words with me, all in Italian, and
Mm.
just fills in so many gaps for me. Um,
Was this a book that was printed and that he
no,
drew from, or that he had written down?
he stayed up, my great grandfather,
Mm.
the night before my grandfather's sister, my great aunt, came to Australia. He stayed up and wrote by hand into this book all the stuff that he had inside him, and wrote it into a book. And she still has the book. It's like 50 something years old.
Wow. So it's a mystery where that came from, whether it came down through the lineage or whether it was
Well,
channeled from.
well, well, I asked her, and she said from his father. So as
Mm.
far as I can comprehend, it's coming down through the masculine line
Mm.
all the way down,
Hmm.
and now to me. And as far as I'm aware, no one in my family had ever claimed it in that way, or done it in a way. There's a beautiful story of my great grandfather doing this healing work, and the priest of the village not liking it at all, and telling him to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so he kind of buried it. It went underground, and then he would just do it for friends and family in exchange for like cigarettes and wine and this kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then the priest fell sick one day and called him in. And
Huh.
he said, no, you don't believe it. You called the police on me. No, I'm not going to come here and help it. The priest got worse and worse and worse. And eventually my great grandfather went in and did some work with him, and he got better. And then it was kind of like, okay, you can do whatever you like, this kind of thing. And when my grandfather and his sister came to Australia, they were told not to tell anyone.
Hmm.
And so my grandfather, I described him to you. I think he hid the healing in this outer persona of trickster, joker, and just charismatic. And I don't think it was conscious. It was just like I feel like I'm the only one, the one now who's like owning it and claiming it and actually doing it and sharing this healing in my family. But it's so alive for me. And I have a bit of that as well, where I'm able to hide it in just the like charisma and like joy and laughter. I just feel so blessed to be in this body and blessed to have this like lineage and have like such a strong body and masculine line. I'm just like blessed. Yeah.
Yeah, what a gift to be given. Yeah, that's certainly something interesting to be curious about. Just following the story of, I wonder whether the priest kind of knew the inherent power in that, but wanted, like, which is such a common kind of thread in this larger tapestry of suppressing natural, alternative, kind of esoteric, mystic knowledge.
Yeah. Well, what I could put together, because a lot of the words that I'm reading, they use like sign of the cross and crosses. So there's crossover,
All right. Yeah.
but what my great grandfather was doing was essentially saying, I don't need to go through the priest to communicate.
Yeah.
I'm just go direct to source.
Yeah.
And
Removing the intermediary.
right. So I speak directly to source, and that comes through me, and then that's where we do the healing. Whereas the priest was like, no, you have to come through me. You have to be in this particular building. You have to pray in this particular way. And so there's something in that.
Yeah.
There's some old story in that, where it's like we have the ability to direct address, direct access, direct communication with whatever force that is, and we don't need to go through an intermediary, and that's threatening. That's threatening for the ones that say no, you must come through this particular channel in order to communicate. And you would know that when you go out and sit for 4 days and 4 nights, that you're developing direct communication.
Yeah, totally. Classic religious authoritarian ideology right there. So then there's certainly a difference then between what we might consider to be traditional bodywork, and then even maybe not traditional bodywork, but traditional in the contemporary sense, where you've been learned through an institution and you've gone to school for 4 or 5 years or however long that is, versus intuitive bodywork. They're two kind of very different things that are touching upon something similar here. Do you want to speak to that for a moment?
Yeah. It's like what we just talked about. It's like the freedom, the freedom from, and I've learned many modalities of healing, like NLP and whatnot, and but it all just adds to. It's like the bones of a story that it's very intimate. It's very intimate, and that direct communication happens body to body. It's like um, uh,
Maybe I'll highlight that. What I'm curious to know what there might be that you're scanning or feeling or seeing in your intuitive bodywork session. And maybe there's a preface to that question as well, which is something to do around your sensory apparatus or sensory antenna, like what
yeah,
comes online, perhaps like the strongest for you in terms of receiving information to then best
yeah,
assist someone.
yeah. So I don't really see things or hear things or really make any comments on what's going on. I see with my fingers and hands, and see with my body, my elbows, or whatever it is that I'm using, and I'm feeling what I would call armoring, which is like build up, build up of tough fascia and protection that's built up around a seed of pain, original pain, and by the time the armor is built up, the whole area like a plate of armor, that there's actually no way. Like when I'm touching it, it feels like touching inanimate objects, you know, and um, so I'm feeling that, and it's just interesting to me as I feel it. I'm just like, wow, this is like just a big ball of stuff, and so I know that inside there's a seed of pain, and that pain is intense and it's old and it hasn't been touched for a long time because of the armor. So to work on the armor or the knots or the tension, and to work through with traditional massage techniques that might be taught in a course or something, is may have some relief for the muscles, but that seed still hasn't been touched. And I know that it's not until the pain can be fully felt that it can be processed and that it can be released. Now, I understand why it would be difficult to allow someone so deep to touch that pain, because it's painful. As long as you're touching the armor, there's a pain, but as the armor falls away, and this is the process using breath and voice and vibration to shake and rattle and dissolve layers and layers of armoring, it opens up new landscapes within the body. Everything softens, and we start to go a little deeper, right down into the darkness of the body. And this is like trance inducing touch, using storytelling, working with the bones.
So you do weave storytelling into these sessions as well while you're laying hands?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's the person. It's a co-creation. I'm there applying a particular touch, while the person receiving is doing their breath and doing their voice, dissolving layers of armoring until that seed can be touched. And once that's touched, the most intense pain can be felt. That kind of zings through the whole body and connects everything up. And then it's like, oh, and then it's released. And that, to happen in one point of the body, happens all over the body. And then so it's just the process of that. And at the end of a session, a person feels like they've met their body, perhaps for the first time.
Wow.
Yeah, so that wild body, the wild serpent, has been brought into the home, brought into the castle, and has been stripped, the layers, the skins, the scales, one by one by one, scrubbed, the intense pain, the screams that the when she's scrubbing with the brush, that kind of intense pain right at the core of it all felt in the bones, and then released. And that's that face of radiant contentment. And then it's the bathing in the milk. And then it's that sleep. And it's that nourishing sleep. And then the marriage. So full integration of the wild, dark force that's been, growing, angry, out there, looking in, threatening to destroy this entire world that's been built, actually gets welcomed back in, actually gets integrated. And then you have an opportunity to be present with the body and say, hello, I see you, I feel you, thank you, I love you, I'm sorry, and so there's an opportunity there. That's what those words that I use is slow down to be able to listen to the whispers of the soul, to the whispers, to hear what the wild twin, that great serpent, is saying underneath the scales, underneath the fangs, underneath it all. That there's a child in there. There's a sweet one, an innocent one. And I stand as that woman with those 7 shirts to allow the scales to fall away. And so,
And then
go.
I imagine quite naturally, through going through this process and through the process of integrating the wild twin, the darkness within the body, there is the settling of the nervous system, there's the slowing down. And I think the words that you used before was finding safety to inhabit our bodies.
That's right. That's a big thing that people say to me is that, wow, I feel safe in my body for the first time. Safe in my body. And that's right. And so essentially, in technical terms, I'm working with the fascia, the fascial layer, which, by the way, is imaginary. It's like, to work with the fascia is imagination work. And so it's the sheath that of the fabric that's woven that encapsulates all the muscles and all the fibers of the muscles through the entire body that can become dense and tight. And to work with the fascia requires a particular kind of touch at a particular depth and a particular slowness, right? And then the fascia dissolves into like collagen, and it dissolves into like jelly. And then the jelly spreads through the body, this softness, and the fascia like holds memories and holds emotions and is also so deeply connected with the nervous system. So it's all tied in with the diaphragm. It's all tied in with breath. So no matter, like, people come and say, oh, I've got a sore lower back, I've got a sore this, I've got a sore that. When I work in the whole body, all of that stuff it's not like I'm working on the particular point where the pain is, I'm working to dissolve the fascia as it ties in with the diaphragm, so breaths can become deeper and everything can soften, so that it's like an unraveling is what it is, like an unraveling. You might be getting a sense about how these stories influence the work that I do and the way that I live. As in, when I'm doing, like, even now as I'm talking about the body work, I can see how it relates to the story that I just told you. You see? And that's amplified many times through maybe all the stories that live within me and live within us.
There are a couple of other threads that I wanted to touch on. I want to be mindful of time, but there was one, I don't know if we want to circle back to this or not, but you mentioned something about wrestling earlier, The two W's is what I had noted down here. One was wrestling, and how that the external wrestling also has something to do with our internal slowness or slowing down process or something around this. And also, I was going to ask if the work that you're doing with the bodywork sessions has been mainly with women, because I know you wrote something the other day where, for whatever reason, you do find that there are women that naturally gravitate to you and to this work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can weave this together. I was very, very overweight from the very beginning, and just continued to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And by 18, 20, at the biggest that I was, 250 kilos. And then the journey from there into healing the physical over the next 10 or 15 years, and everything that I went through to do that, was the animal body that I was in. I was not connected to. I was in a battle against it. And there was a lot of hatred for the body. There was a lot of resentment, and fighting, and ignoring, and like slavery. Slavery is like, you do what I tell you to do, and you don't look a certain way, and it's painful, and and lose weight, look better, God, So from that, the process of healing became, it was like I needed to, just like the wild serpent, I went on the process of taming it. It was like breaking a wild horse with this body that is like, How to Train a Dragon, kind of, or the Avatar, where they get, in order to imprint with that great, beautiful flying creature, you got to prove yourself that you can tame it, ride it, break it. I can identify that process in me as I went to heal the physical, which was just like, I need to just like exercise and work out. I need to use my conscious mind to do these things for years and years and years and years, to like get rid of the fat, to build strength, and it was a wrestling match. It was a real wrestling match. And then jiu-jitsu, I've been training jiu-jitsu for 9 years, almost 10 years, and you're wrestling other people, and eventually realizing that I'm only ever wrestling myself. I'm only ever showing up wrestling myself, being defeated. The story of Jacob wrestling the angel for a blessing. Just the courage to engage in the wrestling, the courage to accept that the wrestle is present, that it can't be avoided, that we are in a wrestling match with the body. It's, for instance, should I or shouldn't I? Okay, do I stay or do I go? Do I choose this or do I choose that? Okay, do I eat that or do I not eat that? Do I go to the gym or do I stay home? This is all wrestling matches. It's all engagement. And my body grew so fat and so big because of my refusal to engage. Right? Refusal to engage in the rest. It's like, no, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of the conflict. I'm afraid of the of getting hurt. I'm afraid of that dark force. So I'm just not going to engage. The process of losing weight was a process of coming to acceptance, of standing up with courage to face it, to face the darkness of the body, and to engage, and continually never-ending acceptance that there is no end to the wrestling. It's just engagement, continual engagement. Never going to solve the issue. There's never going to be a definitive answer that's going to mean that we don't have to engage. It's just constant, never-ending engagement with the never-ending wrestle that's happening on the inside. And so to know that and to embody that means that I can engage in that wrestle with others and teach them the same thing. I meet people who are so afraid to engage. So when I'm, at festivals and in spaces where I'm accepted and embraced in my communities, I often hold space for wrestling. And so I invite people to come, and whoever is, wants to at that time will come, and I start with them very easily and slowly. And a lot of women see that and say, well, okay, I want to try that, but I'm really scared. And so my journey with my own weight loss and losing weight and my own body is great medicine for women who I've begun to see have, a lot of them have issues with body image, and to see me in my acceptance of my body. My body now is lots of loose skin and excess skin, and my body's great. I love my body now. I love all of it, strong and healthy and beautiful, but very unique. And so there's a medicine just in that, just in seeing me walk around with my shirt off. And then so often when I'm wrestling with women, they have to confront all of the stuff. Fear of aggression, fear of men, interactions in the past that have been scary, that refusal to engage that I spoke about, physiological stress response that come up. They have to work through all of that to engage with me, and I hold the space for them to allow to do that. And very, very quickly, very, very, they start to really enjoy it and engage. And once someone says yes to engaging with that wrestle, it's the gift that keeps on giving. Someone who is engaging, is constantly showing up. You can see it in their eyes. It's like when you meet somebody, it's like that, what I say, feeling met. You meet somebody and you say, wow, I feel really met by you, because someone's playing, someone's dancing. This is the same thing as why I do improv and why I work on improv storytelling, because that's engaging. It's like yes and so and then so with the body work, a lot of work with women, moving through a lot of stuff around safety, safe with men, body, sexual trauma, sexual repression, stagnant energy, fear, and attempting to cover up their shining light. So just full permission to stand and be as a woman, powerful. I mean, women, like creators of the universe. It's like, God, yeah. So I love that work, and I feel very comfortable around women and working with women, and it's a great blessing in my life to be surrounded by so many beautiful, amazing women, and the work that I do, I think, I hold something really potent and powerful as a man in this man's body.
Yeah, I can
Um,
sense that.
yeah, that I believe is the marriage at the end of these fairy tales. It's the marriage between the masculine and the feminine, the holding of the polarity between those two poles, and the ability to fluidly move between both.
Yeah, beautiful words, mate. Whenever you have posted some kind of wrestling image or video on social media, I've always felt this big fuck yes in my body. It just
Yeah,
always feels so good to
yeah,
see it and to feel it.
yeah, 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 yeah. hmm I think it feels like that for many people, getting in touch with some ancient part of us.
Yeah, primordial, primal. Absolutely. Well, mate, I think it's getting to about that time to wrap
Mm.
things up. Couple of questions. How can our listeners connect with you or learn more about the work that you're doing and stay updated with what you're offering? Because you got some juicy stuff.
Yeah, well, Nathan Meola on the socials,
What are you doing? Facebook, Instagram,
Facebook
TikTok?
and Instagram, Facebook and Instagram at the moment.
Yep.
Um, yeah, just reach out, or anytime anyone's here on the Central Coast, reach out. But yeah, mainly it's those channels that I'm working with at the moment. It's all quite easeful for me. There will be more coming, but right now it's just there. No website at the moment. No, it's all in the works.
Sounds great. All right. Would you like to list off the offerings that you currently have and anything that might be coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, well, uh, online storytelling course, which is working to awaken the mythic imagination and your own inner storyteller. So I'm running those. Those are 6 week courses. I'm running them online as we go. Online storytelling, story circles coming up, which will be fortnightly, and then lots and lots of in person stuff here in this community. So I'm doing fortnightly story circles. Uh, um, yeah, a whole bunch of stuff in person, and then the bodywork sessions, and also doing one-on-one work. One-on-one storytelling sessions, medicinal storytelling, which is kind of sitting, talking, listening, and then offering stories, these old ancient stories, just like we've done here, to unpack some aspect of someone's life in some way. So yeah, I've got those on offer as well. Really, there are so many different ways to work with me. Uh, yeah, it's all kind of fluid at the moment.
Cool. All right. So the invitation is to get in touch,
Yeah,
connect on social media, and follow along on the journey.
yeah. hmm
Okay, great. Well, let me ask you this final question then. What question or what kind of question might you like to be asked that you don't often get asked?
Wow.
It requires a bit of a spaciousness, that one, doesn't it?
Mm. Yeah, I like to be asked about my bear ancestry. What to explore more, what what it means to hold that the medicine of the bear, which I'm sure we could have dived into. There's so much. Oh, the question I love. Can can you tell me a story? That kind of question, or okay, I love being asked to the question that fills my heart with joy is when I'm living out in the bush and with people, when someone in my family, my village says, "Hey, Bear, will you go and pick up that heavy thing over there and carry it to there?" That's like the fulfillment of my entire purpose, to use this body to help, to lift a heavy thing or to move a thing, or, hey, can I jump up on your shoulders because I'm feeling a little tired, and can you carry me for the next 10 minutes? Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Being asked directly for help, I love.
That's beautiful, mate. That's a nice place to wrap it up, I think. All right, everyone. Let's all give a big thanks to Bearheart Nathan Meola for carving out some space time so that we can have this conversation. So go tune in with Nathan on the socials and show some love. Any final thoughts that want to be spoken before we wrap up in totality?
Perhaps a poem. One of my favorite poems called Advice by Bill Home. It goes like this. Someone dancing inside us learned only a few steps. The do your work in 4/4 time, the what do you expect waltz. He hasn't noticed yet the woman standing away from the lamp, the one with the dark eyes who knows the rumba and strange steps and jumpy rhythms from the mountains in Bulgaria. If they dance together, something unexpected will happen. If they don't, the next world will look a lot like this one. May you all find the courage to dance with that strange, dark woman or man.
Love it, mate. Thank you. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning into this episode. And my invitation is to take a moment to pause and reflect on what has landed for you during this conversation. I mean, so often we just jump from one thing to the next in this frenzy of digital consumption. So it's a good thing to offer a little bit of breathing room to let whatever it is that's meant to land. So fresh air, bare feet on the earth, create something meaningful, and hopefully perhaps this conversation on birdsong was as fruitful as birdsong on Morning Wind. You can catch me on YouTube, Spotify, Instagram, all the socials, or head to my website, koyutakiora.com, and we'll leave it at that. Until next time.